Hi guys, and welcome to Quiet Voice Podcast Channel. Tonight we're stepping into New York City in the winter of 1958, when the sky lowers over the rooftops and the first flakes begin to fall. You stand near a window as evening gathers between the buildings. Snow drifts past the glass in slow white circles, soft at first, almost harmless. Far below, yellow taxis slide along wet streets, their tyres whispering over the pavement. Shop signs glow through the gathering haze. Steam rises from street grates and twists into the cold air like pale smoke from some sleeping machine. So, before you settle into the story, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. And while the snow begins to cover the city, share your location and your local time in the comments. Perhaps you are listening from a warm room, perhaps from a place where snow never falls, or perhaps winter is pressing against your own window tonight. Now it's time to rest. The first thing you notice is not the cold, but the change in sound. New York is never truly quiet, yet the falling snow begins to soften every sharp edge of the city. Horns seem farther away, footsteps lose their hard rhythm, even the elevated trains, groaning above the avenues, sound muted beneath the thickening air. At first, nobody is especially alarmed. Snow belongs to New York winters, and people have learned to treat it with the confidence of citizens who believe the city can handle almost anything. Men in dark wool coats hurry home with newspapers folded beneath their arms. Women pull scarves closer around their faces. Delivery boys steer bicycles carefully through the wet streets, discovering that confidence is not quite the same thing as balance. A few children press their noses to apartment windows and watch the sidewalks turn white. To them, the storm is not trouble, it is possibility. It means sleds, snowballs, and perhaps the great miracle of a day without school. Adults, naturally, have less poetic concerns. They think about train schedules, heating fuel, groceries, and whether the old pipes in the walls will survive another bitter night. You move through a neighbourhood of brownstone houses where iron railings collect delicate white lines. The scent of coal smoke hangs between the buildings. Somewhere, a bakery is closing, and warm air carrying the smell of bread escapes briefly into the street. A woman steps outside to shake a rug, sees the thickening snow, and quickly changes her mind. The rug can remain dusty. Civilization will endure. Fireplaces are not burning everywhere yet, but preparations have begun. In houses with working hearths, families check stacks of wood and buckets of coal. Apartment residents inspect radiators with the suspicious attention usually reserved for unreliable relatives. A metal pipe knocks inside one wall, then it knocks again. Nobody knows what it wants, but at least it proves that something warm is trying to happen. Records confirm that major winter storms often expose the fragile balance of life in the city. New York depends on movement. Food arrives by truck, workers arrive by train, coal and oil must be delivered, doctors, police officers, firefighters, and utility crews must cross streets that can disappear beneath drifting snow. A storm does not need to destroy buildings to create danger. It only needs to slow the city until every ordinary task becomes difficult. By early evening, the flakes grow larger. They strike coats and hats, cling to eyelashes, and settle on the shoulders of pedestrians. Street sweepers work near busy intersections, but the snow returns almost as quickly as it is cleared. A bus pulls to the curb with a tired sigh. Passengers climb aboard, stamping their shoes and filling the interior with damp wool, cold air, and the faint scent of tobacco. Inside one apartment, a family gathers around the radio. The wooden cabinet glows softly in the corner, and the announcer speaks with steady confidence. The forecast suggests continued snow, perhaps heavy at times. The exact strength of the storm remains uncertain. Scholars still bicker over how much ordinary people trusted weather reports in the years before modern forecasting became more precise. Some listeners prepared early, others heard the warning and simply turned up the music. Oddly enough, many households kept old storm habits long after electric lighting became common. Candles might be stored beside kitchen matches, and spare blankets might remain folded in trunks for years, waiting for a night exactly like this one. Nobody thinks of these objects as heroic, yet before morning, a candle, a wool blanket, or a small pile of dry wood may become more valuable than the finest furniture in the room. You sense the city changing minute by minute. The pavement vanishes first, then the curbs begin to fade. Parked cars acquire white roofs and rounded edges. Newspaper stands close early. Shopkeepers drag boxes indoors. A doorman sweeps the same patch of sidewalk 3 times and finally accepts defeat with the dignity of a man who has negotiated unsuccessfully with the sky. The cold presses more firmly against the windows. In older buildings, drafts slip beneath doors and through narrow cracks in the frames. Families roll towels and you place them along the floor. Curtains are drawn, chairs move closer together. Someone carries another log toward the hearth. Someone else checks the coal bin and decides not to mention how low it looks. Outside, the storm is still beautiful. That is part of its deception. Snow gathers on church steps, fire escapes, rooftops, and bare branches. It turns the crowded city into something softer and almost unreal. For a few minutes, you can imagine that every problem has been covered, every argument quieted, every hard corner made gentle. But the snow does not stop. It falls more heavily now, crossing the light of street lamps in endless silver lines. Traffic slows. Footsteps hurry. Windows brighten as families return home and close themselves against the night. One by one, fireplaces begin to glow, and the city prepares for hours that will test its patience, its courage, and its supply of dry wood. The radio announcer keeps his voice calm, almost too calm, as though careful pronunciation might persuade the weather to behave. You hear phrases like heavy accumulation, difficult travel, and strong winds near the coast. They sound serious enough, but not yet frightening. New Yorkers are accustomed to warnings. They have heard storms described as historic, dangerous, and unforgettable, only to wake the next morning beneath a respectable but manageable layer of snow. In kitchens across the city, people continue preparing supper. Pots rattle on stoves, coffee percolates, plates are set on tables while the radio murmurs from a nearby shelf. A father glances toward the window, sees the white blur outside, and says that the storm will probably weaken by midnight. He says it with the confidence of a man who has never personally negotiated with a winter sky. You stand near the glowing radio cabinet and listen as the forecast shifts slightly. Earlier reports suggested a passing storm. Now the announcer warns that the system may remain over the region longer than expected. Snowfall totals are revised upward. Wind may push loose snow into deep drifts. Temperatures are expected to fall, turning wet streets into frozen surfaces beneath the accumulating powder. The science of weather prediction in 1958 is improving, but it remains limited by modern standards. Forecasters study pressure readings, ship reports, weather balloons, and observations from distant stations. They work without the detailed satellite images that later generations will take for granted. Records confirm that the first successful American weather satellite is still 2 years away. The atmosphere, therefore, keeps many of its secrets hidden beyond the coast. This uncertainty creates a peculiar mood. The warning is real, yet nobody can say exactly how severe the night will become. One expert predicts steady snowfall, another expects the storm to move east. A newspaper report mentions the possibility of strong winds, but offers no reason for panic. You can almost hear the city deciding block by block whether to believe the sky or the familiar confidence of daily routine. Some families take precautions. A woman sends her teenage son to buy bread, milk, candles, and matches. He returns carrying a paper bag that is already damp at the bottom. In another building, a superintendent checks the furnace and orders extra coal brought closer to the boiler room. A grocery clerk stacks canned soup near the counter, where customers can reach it quickly. Other residents make no changes at all. Restaurants keep their tables set. Theatre crowds gather beneath bright marquees. brushing snow from elegant coats. Office workers remain at their desks, determined to finish one more task before leaving. They believe the subway will carry them home. It always does, until it does not, which is a lesson cities teach with impressive patience. A curious footnote from the period is the faith many people place in personal signs rather than official forecasts. Someone trusts the ache in an old knee. Someone watches the behaviour of pigeons. Someone claims that the sharp smell of chimney smoke means the storm will pass quickly. Such methods are not especially scientific, but they have one great advantage. They allow everyone to feel like an expert while standing comfortably indoors. You hear a telephone ring in a narrow hallway. A sister calls from another borough to ask whether the snow looks worse there. The answer depends entirely on which window is used. From the front room, the street appears merely white. From the rear kitchen, where snow is piling against the fire escape, the storm looks much more determined. The Weather Bureau issues another update. Travel is becoming hazardous. Drivers are advised to remain cautious. Public transportation is still operating, though delays are expected. No one says the city should close. No one imagines that every road will soon become impassable. The language remains measured, because measured language is what official voices prefer, even when the sky has begun shouting. No agreement has been reached on whether forecasters of the era were too cautious in communicating uncertainty, or whether the public simply heard what it wished to hear. Some historians argue that limited technology made precise warnings impossible. Others believe residents had grown too familiar with winter alerts and no longer responded strongly. The truth may rest somewhere between imperfect prediction and ordinary human stubbornness. You move through a small neighbourhood shop as customers gather near the counter. Shelves are still full, but certain items are disappearing quickly. Bread goes first, then milk, then batteries. A man buys 3 newspapers, although one would contain exactly the same forecast as the others. Perhaps he hopes that agreement among them will make the weather less confusing. Outside, delivery trucks struggle through slush. Their wheels spin at intersections, scattering dirty snow against curbs. Drivers lean forward over steering wheels, staring through narrow, cleared patches of glass. Windshield wipers sweep back and forth with a tired mechanical rhythm. Each journey takes longer than expected, and each delay begins to affect another part of the city. The radio now reports stalled vehicles on several roads. Trains remain active, but switches require attention as snow gathers around the tracks. Crews are sent out carrying tools, lanterns, and heavy gloves. Their work receives little notice. Most listeners assume the system will continue. The unseen labour beneath ordinary life is easiest to ignore when it succeeds. At a corner tavern, men debate the forecast over hot drinks. One insists the storm will be finished by morning. Another predicts that schools will close. A third claims he has seen worse winters and offers a detailed account that grows less believable with every sentence. The bartender listens without comment. He has heard every storm in New York described as both nothing special and the worst in living memory. In apartment buildings, the evening news ends and music follows. Some families turn away from the forecast. There is supper to finish, homework to complete, and children to send toward bed. Yet the adults keep glancing toward the windows. Snow now streaks sideways beneath the street lamps. The wind has strengthened, and the sound against the glass is no longer soft. A woman tests the latch on her window. A man checks the furnace twice. A shopkeeper closes earlier than planned. These are small decisions, made quietly, without announcement. The city has not accepted the full danger, but doubt has entered every room. The forecast continues speaking in careful sentences, while the storm writes its own message across the streets. By the time most people begin to believe it, the ordinary routes home are already narrowing beneath the snow. You step into the evening rush at the hour when offices release their workers and the city usually surges with purpose. Elevators open, lobby doors swing wide, and crowds spill onto the sidewalks beneath a sky that has almost vanished behind snow. The first sensation is confusion disguised as routine. Men button their coats and join familiar lines at bus stops. Women lift their collars, protect paper parcels beneath their arms, and walk toward subway entrances. Everyone knows where home is. The difficulty lies in reaching it. Snow presses against faces in sharp, cold grains. It gathers on hat brims and melts along eyebrows. Street lamps glow inside pale circles, illuminating only a few yards of pavement before the storm closes around them. Buildings that normally dominate the avenues become dark shapes behind a moving white curtain. You hear traffic attempting to continue, horn sound in short bursts, engines strain, tyres grind against packed snow and then spin uselessly. A taxi tries to climb a gentle rise and slides backward several feet, causing 3 pedestrians to leap aside with surprising elegance. No one applauds, though the performance deserves consideration. At major intersections, police officers stand in long coats and heavy gloves, directing vehicles through lanes that no longer remain visible. Their whistles pierce the muffled air. Drivers lean close to windshields, trying to distinguish traffic signals from shop lights and reflections on wet glass. Records confirm that New York in the late 1950s depended heavily on buses, subways, commuter trains, and private automobiles moving together in a carefully timed system. When one part slowed, pressure spread rapidly through the others. A delayed bus created larger crowds at subway stations. A stalled truck blocked taxis. A frozen railway switch affected thousands of passengers far beyond the place where the failure occurred. You descend a subway staircase with a stream of office workers. Snow melts from shoes and darkens the concrete steps. The warmer air below carries the smell of damp wool, metal, tobacco smoke, and electricity. Platforms are crowded but orderly. People hold newspapers, briefcases, shopping bags, and there's guarded expressions of commuters who believe irritation is more respectable than fear. A train arrives already full. Doors open, and passengers attempt the complicated urban ritual of leaving and entering at the same time. Someone loses a glove, someone drops a folded newspaper, a man presses himself against the door and insists there is room for one more person. There is not, but human optimism is a powerful force. The train departs slowly, another is announced, then delayed. The voice over the station speaker becomes distorted by static. Passengers look upward, as though the ceiling might offer a clearer explanation. A mother holds her young daughter close while the child watches snow-covered shoes pass in every direction. Above ground, buses crawl through narrowing streets. Each stop brings more riders than the vehicle can comfortably hold. Windows cloud with breath, wet coats brush against one another. Strangers who would normally guard every inch of personal space are pressed shoulder to shoulder, united by inconvenience and the faint hope that the driver knows what he's doing. The driver sits forward, both hands firm on the wheel. He moves carefully, avoiding sudden turns. At one corner, the bus slides toward the curb and stops inches from a mailbox. Passengers fall silent. Then the engine growls, the tyres catch, and movement resumes. Someone mutters that this is perfectly normal. Nobody believes him. Oddly enough, some commuters carry small folding overshoes in briefcases or handbags. Practical rubber coverings designed to protect polished footwear from slush. They look awkward, but vanity weakens quickly when icy water reaches the socks. A few pedestrians without such protection begin wrapping newspaper around their shoes, an improvised solution that lasts almost as long as dignity in a snowbank. You follow a group leaving a stalled streetcar connection and choosing to walk. They move in a loose line, stepping into the footprints of those ahead. Snow reaches their ankles, then their shins where drifts collect between buildings. Wind rushes down the avenue, lifting powder into their faces and erasing the path behind them. Shop owners keep doors open for stranded travellers. A pharmacy allows customers to crowd near the heating vents. A diner fills with people waiting for traffic to improve. Cups of coffee appear on counters. Soup bowls send steam into the warm room. Coats hang over chair backs, dripping onto the floor. The evening rush loses its direction. Instead of thousands of separate journeys, the city becomes a network of pauses. People wait inside stations, under awnings, in hotel lobbies, and beside stalled vehicles. Some telephone home from booths, feeding coins into narrow slots and speaking loudly over the noise. A wife hears that her husband is still downtown. A mother learns that her son has left school but has not reached home. A landlord receives 3 calls about weak heat and answers each with less confidence than the last. Telephone lines remain active, though some calls fail to connect as demand increases. Scholars remain divided over whether urban residents in such storms became more cooperative because of shared danger, or simply because normal rules became impossible to maintain. Some accounts emphasize generosity and patience. Others describe pushing, angry arguments, and drivers abandoning vehicles in terrible places. Both versions can be true. A city contains enough people for kindness and selfishness to stand on the same corner. You reach a commuter railway terminal where the great departure boards change slowly. Trains are listed as delayed. Crowds gather beneath the high ceiling, their voices rising into the shadowed space. Porters move through the station carrying luggage. Railway employees answer the same questions repeatedly, each time with fewer details. A train finally boards, and passengers hurry toward it with sudden energy. Inside, every seat fills, aisles become crowded. The cars smell of snow, leather gloves, and warm machinery. When the train begins to move, a quiet relief passes through the passengers, yet progress is uneven. The train stops between stations. Lights remain on, but conversation fades. Outside the windows there is only darkness and snow. Minutes pass. A conductor walks through the quays, explaining that crews are clearing a switch ahead. You feel how quickly confidence can shrink. The city still exists around you, but familiar distances have changed. A journey of 30 minutes becomes 2 hours, a mile feels like 5. Home is not far, yet it seems separated by wind, stalled engines, frozen rails, and streets that no longer recognize their own names. Near midnight, many travellers finally reach their neighbourhoods. They step from buses and trains into deeper snow, tired and stiff from standing. Building entrances appear like small beacons. Doors open. Warm air touches cold faces. Others remain stranded beneath station clocks, watching the hands move forward while the city settles into white silence. A faint orange glow begins appearing behind curtains, one window at a time, as families turn toward the oldest source of comfort they possess. Fireplaces that spend ordinary evenings as decorative shadows are cleaned, opened and brought to life. Iron grates scrape against brick. Ash is pushed aside. Dry kindling is arranged with the care of a small ceremony. You kneel near one hearth and feel the rough floorboards beneath your palm. The room is cool enough that every breath seems noticeable. A match scratches against its box, flares brightly, and touches a twist of newspaper. Flame crawls along the paper, catches the kindling and begins its patient work. For a few seconds, the fire appears fragile. It bends beneath the draft and nearly disappears. Then a narrow tongue of flame reaches the first log. Resin snaps, smoke lifts through the chimney. The room gains not only warmth, but confidence. Across the city, the same ritual unfolds in brownstones, row houses, old hotels, parish buildings, and private clubs. Wood is carried from basements, coal is lifted in black metal scuttles. Children are told to stand back, then immediately move closer. Adults place chairs around the hearth and pretend the arrangement is temporary. The scent of burning oak fills one parlour. In another, soft coal gives off a darker, heavier smell. Wax smoke rises from candles placed on mantels. Damp gloves are laid near the fire, close enough to dry but not so close that they begin producing their own weather emergency. Records confirm that many New York homes in the 1950s rely mainly on central heating, coal furnaces, oil boilers, or steam radiators rather than open fireplaces. Yet a working hearth remains valuable when heating systems weaken or fuel deliveries become uncertain. Fireplaces are less efficient than enclosed stoves, but on a bitter night, efficiency is an argument best made by someone standing farther from the flames. You watch a grandfather inspect the damper with practiced hands. He has not used the fireplace seriously in years, but the old knowledge returns. He listens for the pull of air in the chimney. He adjusts the logs so they rest close enough to share heat, but far enough apart to breathe. The younger members of the family observe with new respect. In a nearby house, the first attempt goes badly. Smoke rolls into the room because the chimney is cold and the damper is only partly open. Windows must be raised for a moment, allowing winter air to rush inside. Everyone coughs, waves towels, and offers advice. The person who built the fire receives 6 instructions at once and follows none of them. Oddly enough, some households keep bundles of newspapers tied with string specifically for starting fires during winter emergencies. The papers carry yesterday's headlines into the flames, which may be the most peaceful fate a troubling headline can receive. Comic pages curl first, financial news burns with equal enthusiasm, the weather report, perhaps out of embarrassment, disappears quickly. You feel warmth spread slowly across the room. It touches faces before it reaches corners. People hold their hands towards the flames, turning their palms and then their backs. A kettle is placed near the hearth. Blankets arrive from bedrooms. The room becomes crowded, yet no one complains about the lack of space. Fire changes the mood of a household. It gives everyone something to watch. Flames rise, collapse, and rise again. Red embers form beneath the logs. Sparks travel upward through the dark opening. Conversation grows quieter because the fire seems to be speaking in clicks and sighs and sudden little cracks. A council notice from the era proves that city officials regularly warn residents about chimney safety, blocked flues, and the danger of leaving open fires unattended. Such warnings are sensible, but storms encourage people to improvise. Families burn scrap wood, broken furniture, old packing crates, and anything else that seems dry enough to catch. One man considers sacrificing a damaged kitchen chair. His wife objects, not because the chair is beautiful, but because it belongs to a set. The storm may challenge transportation, heating, and public order, but matching furniture remains a matter of principle. Firewood becomes a quiet subject of calculation. A family counts the logs stacked beside the hearth and estimates how long they will last. Large pieces are saved for the coldest hours. Smaller pieces are used to keep embers alive. Nobody wants the fire to die, because restarting it in a chilled room requires time, patience, and another argument about the damper. In wealthier houses, servants move between storage rooms and parlours, carrying polished brass tools and neat baskets of seasoned wood. In modest apartments, residents break discarded crates in courtyards or ask building superintendents whether any spare coal remains. Warmth follows wealth imperfectly. Even an elegant house can become cold when deliveries fail, while a humble room can remain comfortable if neighbours share what they have. Arguments split along several lines over how widespread fireplace use truly is during major New York snowstorms of this period. Some historians believe later memories exaggerate the number of active hearths because a firelight creates a powerful image. Others point to older housing records and personal accounts suggesting that many chimneys remain usable. Memory may polish the scene, but the need for warmth is not imaginary. You enter a church hall where volunteers have opened the doors to people unable to reach home. A large fireplace burns at one end of the room. Folding chairs form uneven rows around it. Wet coats hang from hooks. Strangers sit together holding cups of hot broth while snow presses against the tall windows. The fire becomes a kind of clock. Fresh logs mark the passing hours. Ash settles, the The kettle whistles, someone tells a story, then another person begins one. Children who expected adventure grow sleepy beneath borrowed blankets. Their faces shine red and gold in the flickering light. In another neighbourhood, an elderly woman sits alone near a smaller hearth. She keeps the fire low to conserve wood. Every sound from the chimney makes her look up. A branch taps against the window. The building groans in the wind. Then someone knocks at her door. A neighbour stands outside holding 2 split logs and a covered bowl of stew. No grand speech follows. The visitor simply steps inside, brushes snow from her coat, and places the wood beside the hearth. That modest gift changes the room. The fire is fed, the bowl is opened. Steam rises with the scent of onions and herbs. 2 chairs move closer together. Throughout the city, fireplaces remain lit because no one knows how long the cold will last. Their glow falls across family photographs, bookcases, clocks, tired faces, and sleeping children. Beyond the walls, avenues disappear beneath drifting snow. Inside, every flame holds a small circle of darkness at a distance. You feel the apartment building tighten around itself as the cold grows sharper. Doors close more firmly, windows are checked twice. Curtains are drawn across glass that has begun to frost at the edges. Every room seems to shrink toward its warmest corner, while the outer walls take on the chill of stone left beneath a winter moon. In the hallway, the wooden floor creaks under careful footsteps. A tenant carries folded blankets from one room to another. Someone pushes a rolled towel against the bottom of door to block the draft. Someone else stuffs newspaper into a narrow gap beside a window frame. The paper rustles whenever the wind presses against it, giving the room the faint sound of pages turning by themselves. Old apartment buildings are full of small weaknesses. Cold air enters through loose sash windows, worn door frames, cracked plaster, and vents that never seem to close completely. You can place your hand near the wall and feel the temperature change. The centre of the room is merely cool. The edge of the room feels like a warning. Radiators knock and hiss with unpredictable rhythm. One gives off steady warmth. Another remains stubbornly cold. A third becomes so hot that nobody can touch it, while the bedroom across the hall might as well have been rented to the weather. Steam heating systems have their own personalities, and none of them are interested in fairness. You hear metal pipes clanging behind the walls. The sound travels upward through several floors, waking a baby and alarming a small dog. The superintendent moves from apartment to apartment carrying a wrench, an oil can, and the expression of a man being blamed for winter itself. He opens valves, checks pressure, and listens closely to the pipes. Records from the period show that many New York apartment buildings depend on central steam heat controlled from a basement boiler. A single problem below can affect every family above. When coal, oil, water pressure, or machinery fails, the loss of warmth spreads quickly through the entire structure. The city may contain millions of private lives, yet one furnace can hold several dozen of them in its iron hands. You follow the superintendent down a narrow stairway into the basement. The air changes as you descend. It smells of dust, wet concrete, machine oil, and warm metal. Pipes run across the ceiling. The boiler stands in the dim room like a dark but breathing animal. Its surface ticks softly as heat expands the iron. The superintendent checks the gauge and adds fuel with measured caution. He knows that keeping the building warm is not simply a matter of making the fire larger. Too much pressure can damage the system. Too little leaves upper floors cold. He adjusts valves and waits, listening for changes that only experience can detect. A curious household habit appears in many rooms. Families hang heavy blankets across doorways to trap warmth in a single space. The result is practical but theatrical. Entering the living room begins to feel like stepping onto a small stage. Although the audience consists mainly of tired relatives wearing sweaters over nightclothes, you move through one apartment where the kitchen has become the centre of life. The gas oven warms the room while supper cooks, though everyone knows it should not be used carelessly for heating. Pots simmer on the stove, moisture gathers on the windows, the smell of potatoes, onions, and broth settles into the warm air. Chairs are brought in from other rooms. A mattress is dragged closer for the children. The family decides to sleep together in the warmest part of the apartment rather than spread across several cold bedrooms. Privacy becomes less important than temperature. Complaints are allowed, but only in a quiet voice. In another building, the landlord has ordered tenants not to tamper with radiator valves. Naturally, several tenants begin tampering with them immediately. One man turns a valve too far and releases a thin jet of steam. He jumps backward, grabs a towel, and announces that the system was already like that. His wife does not believe him, but she is too cold to conduct a formal investigation. The faint scent of heated dust rises from radiators when they grow hot after hours of weakness. Wet socks hang over chair backs. Mittens rest on metal covers. A scarf placed too close begins to smell faintly scorched, and is rescued with only minor damage and considerable criticism. The cold also creates strange alliances among neighbours. People who usually exchange only brief greetings begin knocking on one another's doors. A woman on the 3rd floor has extra blankets. A family on the 2nd floor has a warmer kitchen. An elderly couple on the top floor needs help carrying water. The building becomes less like a stack of separate homes and more like a single crowded household. No firm agreement exists among social historians about whether emergency cooperation in dense apartment buildings was stronger in the middle 20th century than it is in later decades. Some argue that shared hallways, local shops, and long residence created closer ties. Others point out that loneliness, distrust, and conflict were also common. The walls were thin, but human distance could still be wide. You pause outside one apartment and hear a soft conversation inside. A mother reassures her children that the building is safe. She tells them the pipes are noisy because they are working hard. She says the wind is only moving around the corners. Her voice remains calm even as she pulls another blanket over their shoulders. The children listen for a while, then begin asking practical questions. Will school be open? Can snow reach the roof? Can a radiator explode? Why does the hallway smell like cabbage? The mother answers the first 3 with patience and ignores the 4th, which is perhaps the wisest response. On the upper floors, cold settles more deeply. Warm air rises, but it does not always arrive where it is needed. Window frames tremble. Frost thickens in pale fern-like patterns across the glass. Tenants place bowls beneath leaks where melting snow has found a path through the roof. A man climbs to the attic with a flashlight and finds wind pushing powder through a damaged vent. He blocks the opening with scrapwood and an old coat. It is not elegant, but elegance has little value at 2 a.m. when snow is entering the building. You return to the hallway and feel how the apartment house has changed. Doors that usually remain shut now stand partly open. Light spills across the floorboards. Voices travel between rooms. Someone passes a kettle, someone carries soup upstairs, someone offers a place near a radiator that finally begins to warm. The building still groans under the storm. Pipes knock, windows shake. The cold presses from every side, yet behind blankets, curtains, towels, newspapers, and stubborn old walls, the residents hold their ground, one room at a time. Morning should have brought excitement for the youngest members of the city, and in many homes it certainly does. You hear delighted laughter long before breakfast is finished. Small hands wipe circles through frosted windows, eager to measure the snowfall against the familiar fence. Parked automobile or mailbox that has almost disappeared beneath smooth white drifts. To a child, the storm still resembles an enormous invitation. Boots are pulled on with remarkable speed. Wool hats disappear beneath thick hoods. Mittens rarely match, yet nobody considers that important. The front door opens, and the cold rushes inside with such force that every adult nearby immediately reminds someone to close it. Out Outside, the neighborhood has become almost unrecognizable. Sidewalks have vanished beneath deep snow. Iron fences wear rounded white caps. Shrubs have become gentle mounds without shape or color. Every rooftop carries a heavy blanket that sparkles beneath the pale winter light. Children leap into the drifts with fearless enthusiasm. They discover very quickly that snow reaching an adult's ankle may rise almost to their knees. Every step becomes an adventure. Some tumble forward, disappearing into powder before bursting into cheerful laughter. Others begin rolling snow into enormous balls that refuse to stay round because the fresh snow is too light. One determined boy announces that he will build the greatest snow fort in New York. His younger sister quietly begins building her own beside it, which soon proves larger, stronger, and much straighter. The competition ends peacefully because neither builder wishes to leave the snow long enough to argue properly. Parents watch from windows while holding steaming cups of coffee. Their smiles appear easily at first. It's impossible not to enjoy the sight of children treating winter as though it were a friendly visitor. Yet as the hours pass, small concerns begin gathering like the clouds overhead. The snow is still falling. It no longer seems like the playful shower that welcomed the morning. Thick flakes continue descending without pause, filling footprints almost as soon as they appear. Sled tracks vanish. Freshly shoveled paths slowly disappear beneath another layer. Records confirm that prolonged snowfall creates greater danger than a brief heavy burst because continuous accumulation steadily overwhelms roads, sidewalks, transportation, and emergency services. Even moderate snowfall becomes serious when it refuses to end. A mother opens the front door and calls her children inside. They answer with the universal confidence shared by energetic youngsters. Just 5 more minutes. 5 minutes become 15. Eventually she walks into the yard herself, gently brushing snow from coats and hats, while pretending not to notice that she is smiling. Inside, mittens hang above radiators. Boots leave puddles near the entrance, scarves stretch across chairbacks. The house fills with the comforting smell of hot chocolate, cinnamon, and damp wool slowly drying. One curious footnote from winter traditions involves placing boots near fireplaces stuffed with newspaper. The paper absorbs moisture surprisingly well, though it often leaves faint black printing inside the boots. A child might discover tomorrow's headlines decorating yesterday's socks. Throughout the city, teachers begin wondering whether schools can even open the following day. Principals telephone one another. Custodians inspect sidewalks already buried beneath fresh drifts. School buses become an impossible subject because many streets can barely support ordinary traffic. Children naturally hope for unexpected freedom. Adults begin calculating missed work. You visit a small grocery where several parents have arrived seeking additional supplies. Shelves remain reasonably stocked, yet customers purchase more than usual. Flour, canned vegetables, oatmeal, and coffee disappear steadily into paper bags. Nobody speaks loudly. People simply sense that staying indoors may last longer than expected. The shopkeeper notices the growing concern. He offers reassuring words while quietly checking the remaining stock behind the counter. Experience has taught him that confidence should be displayed generously, even when certainty cannot. Outside, the wind strengthens. Snow now blows sideways through narrow streets, gathering into drifts beside buildings. Bare tree branches sway sharply, scattering loose powder into swirling clouds. A dog bounds happily through the snow for several minutes before deciding that indoors possesses many overlooked advantages. Children standing at windows begin noticing changes they ignored earlier. The mail carrier has not arrived. The garbage truck has not appeared. Very few automobiles are moving. Even the familiar sounds of the neighborhood seem distant. Scholars continue debating how children remember severe weather events compared with adults. Some researchers believe youthful memories preserve wonder more strongly than fear. Others suggest that children quietly absorb the anxiety surrounding them, even while laughing in the snow. Both ideas seem possible when you watch bright faces gradually studying the worried expressions of their parents. By afternoon, outdoor games grow shorter. Snowballs become heavier as fresh powder compresses into ice. Sleds struggle across uneven drifts. One little girl notices that the snow has nearly reached the top of a nearby fence. She stops playing and simply stares at it. "Can snow keep growing forever?" she asks. Her grandfather smiles gently. "No," he says, "it only feels that way." Still, he continues looking toward the sky after she returns to her game. The neighborhood has entered a quieter rhythm. Children who spent the morning racing through deep snow now sit indoors wrapped in blankets, drawing winter scenes with colored pencils or playing board games around kitchen tables. Every so often they hurry back to the windows, expecting the snowfall to have stopped, or instead they find fresh flakes drifting steadily downward. One father finally takes a ruler into the yard, pressing it carefully into the snow to satisfy curious questions about the depth. The measurement surprises even him. He shakes his head, wipes the ruler clean, and returns inside without saying very much. The room grows silent for a moment. Not because anyone is frightened, because everyone has begun realizing that the storm is larger than the stories they plan to tell about it. Outside, the wind continues shaping the drifts into smooth white hills. Inside, families refill cups of cocoa, stir warm soup, and glance toward the windows a little more often than before. The cheerful excitement has not disappeared. It has simply learned to share the room with quiet respect for the endless snow still falling beyond the glass. You step into a street that no longer behaves like a street. The familiar line of the curb has disappeared. Parked automobiles have become smooth white shapes with only mirrors, door handles or antenna tips showing above the snow. Steps leading to brownstone entrances slope into drifts so deep that residents must carve narrow passages with shovels. At each corner, the city seems to have been redrawn by wind. Street signs remain visible, but the roads beneath them do not. Snow piles against walls, stoops, fences, and telephone poles. It gathers in the sheltered spaces between buildings, then rises into long ridges where the wind releases its burden. A man opens his front door and discovers a pale barrier pressed against it. He pushes once, then again, and finally retreats to find a stronger shoulder and a less optimistic plan. You hear shovels scraping against stone. The sound is steady, almost musical, though the people doing the work would probably choose a less charming description. Metal blades strike buried pavement, wooden handles creak, breath rises in clouds around how Hyundai faces. Every cleared path quickly fills with loose powder. A group of residents begins digging from opposite ends of the same block. They cannot see one another through the blowing snow, but they hear the rhythm of distant shovels and continue working toward the sound. It's a small form of navigation, guided not by signs or landmarks, but by persistence. Records confirm that deep urban drifts can exceed the measured snowfall because wind pushes loose snow into concentrated piles beside structures. A city block receiving one depth of snow may contain doorways and alleys buried beneath far more. The official total means little to someone facing a drift taller than the family automobile. You move carefully along what should be a sidewalk. Each step sinks unevenly. One foot finds packed snow, the next drops into a hidden hollow near the curb. Your balance shifts, and your gloved hand reaches for an iron railing almost completely covered in frost. The cold metal bites through the artery. No one walks quickly now. People test the ground ahead with broom handles, shovel shafts, or umbrellas. The city has gained thousands of cautious explorers, all crossing territory they knew perfectly well yesterday. A curious footnote appears near a buried fire hydrant. One resident ties a bright kitchen towel to a nearby fence so emergency crews can locate it. Others begin marking hydrants with broomsticks, crates, or painted boards. The objects look untidy, but tidiness has surrendered to usefulness. At an intersection, traffic lights continue changing for roads without traffic. Red, yellow, and green glow through the snow in patient succession. Their obedience feels slightly absurd. The machinery follows its schedule even though the city beneath it has stopped cooperating. A delivery truck sits at an angle across one avenue. Snow reaches the wheel hubs. The driver and 2 volunteers dig around the tyres, then place wooden planks beneath them. The engine growls, the wheels turn, snow sprays backward. The truck moves several inches and sinks again. Nobody curses loudly. The storm seems too large for personal insult. You pass a row of shops where awnings sag under the weight of snow. Owners use long poles to knock the accumulation loose. Each strike sends a heavy sheet sliding toward the pavement. Everyone nearby steps back quickly, because winter has discovered yet another way to make standing still dangerous. Some storefront windows glow behind thick frost. Handwritten notices appear on doors. Closed due to weather. No deliveries. Help available inside. The language is plain, the circumstances require no decoration. Arguments among urban historians remain unsettled over whether great snowstorms temporarily erase social boundaries or merely hide them. Wealthier residents may have better heating, larger stores of food, and hired help. Poorer families may face colder rooms, fewer supplies, and greater danger. Yet on a buried street, everyone must still confront the same blocked doorway, the same vanished curb, and the same indifferent wind. You enter a narrow side lane where snow has drifted almost to the first floor windows. A family inside watches through a small cleared circle in the glass. The children cannot see the pavement at all. To them, the lane resembles a white field with brick walls rising from it. A grocer attempts to reach his shop using a wooden sled. He has tied boxes of bread and canned food beneath a canvas sheet. 2 teenagers is pulled from the front while he pushes from behind. The sled glides well over packed snow, then catches on a hidden rubbish bin and tips sideways. Cans roll into the drift. For several minutes, everyone searches with mittened hands, laughing despite the cold. A tin of peaches is found beneath a mound near the wall. A can of soup appears inside someone's boot print. Nothing is lost except time, and time has become strangely abundant. The city sounds different in these buried streets. There are few engines, no steady flow of tyres, no clatter of delivery carts. Instead you hear wind against shutters, shovel blades, distant voices, and the occasional crash of snow sliding from a roof. The silence makes every sound seem important. A whistle carries from 1 block away. A dog barks behind a closed gate. A church bell rings the hour, though the hour feels less meaningful when movement has nearly stopped. You come upon a police officer walking beside an abandoned patrol automobile. He carries a radio and uses the vehicle only as a landmark. His route now depends on footpaths made by residents. He checks doors, asks about elderly tenants, and records which streets remain blocked. At one corner, he pauses because the street name sign is coated in ice. He scrapes it clean with the edge of a key and studies it for a moment, as though confirming that the city still exists beneath all this white. The snow continues to simplify the landscape. Automobiles become hills, stairways become slopes, gardens become blank surfaces, alleys vanish completely. You notice how quickly memory replaces sight. Residents point beneath the snow and explain where the curb should be, where a cellar door lies hidden, where a drain might open beneath the drift. Knowledge becomes communal. One person remembers a basement grate, another warns of a broken paving stone. Someone marks a buried step with a broom. Without such guidance, every crossing becomes uncertain. Near evening, the fading light turns the streets blue and grey. Lamps glow behind curtains. Shovelers finally rest, leaning against their handles and studying the narrow paths they have created. The paths are imperfect, twisting around buried vehicles and deep drifts. Yet they connect doors to corners, corners to shops, and shops to shelters. The city has not regained its streets. It has built new ones by hand. A bell rings inside the firehouse, sharp and immediate, cutting through the quiet like a blade through cloth. You feel the room change at once. Men rise from wooden chairs, boots strike the floor. Heavy coats are pulled on, buckles fastened, helmets lifted from hooks. The engine waits behind broad doors, red paint dulled beneath a layer of cold moisture. Its brass fittings catch the light, bright and solemn. The alarm concerns a tenement several blocks away. Smoke has been reported from an upper floor. Under ordinary conditions, the journey would take only minutes. Tonight, distance has become an enemy. The firehouse doors open, and wind drives snow across the threshold. The driver starts the engine. It coughs, shudders, then settles into a deep mechanical growl. Firefighters climb aboard while others lift shovels and lengths of rope into place. The vehicle rolls forward. Almost immediately, its tires struggle, snow presses against the wheels, and the street beneath is hidden under packed ice. The driver keeps the engine steady, resisting the urge to accelerate too sharply. Speed means little when every turn may send the vehicle sliding toward a wall. You hear the bell ringing as the fire engine moves through the buried avenue. The sound travels farther than the vehicle itself. Residents appear at windows. Some descend to the street carrying shovels. Others wave from doorways, pointing toward the clearest route. A group of men begins digging ahead of the engine, opening a narrow passage one heavy scoop at a time. Records confirm that winter storms place unusual strain on urban fire departments because blocked roads delay engines. Buried hydrants slow water access, and frozen equipment can fail at the worst possible moment. Fire does not pause for weather. In severe cold, every lost minute grows more dangerous. The engine reaches an intersection where an abandoned delivery truck blocks the way. There is no room to pass. The firefighters climb down. One examines the truck, another studies the side street. A third begins clearing snow around the wheels. The driver of the abandoned vehicle is nowhere nearby, which earns him several quiet opinions that are not especially charitable. A team attaches a chain from the fire engine to the truck frame. The engine pulls slowly, metal groans, tires spin. The truck shifts several feet, enough to create a narrow opening. The fire engine squeezes through with inches to spare. A curious footnote from winter firefighting concerns the use of salt, heated tools, and even blankets to keep hose connections from freezing. A hose full of water can stiffen rapidly in bitter air, becoming less like flexible equipment and more like an extremely inconvenient iron pole. You arrive at the tenement. Smoke spills from a third-floor window, dark against the white storm. Residents crowd the sidewalk in coats, nightclothes, and borrowed blankets. Some carry children. Others clutch small bags or family photographs taken from drawers in haste. The building entrance stands open. Warm smoke rolls into the cold air. Firefighters move inside with axes, lanterns, and breathing protection that is far less advanced than what later generations will know. The stairwell is narrow. Water drips from boots. People descend while firefighters climb, pressing close to the walls to pass one another. You follow the sound of cracking wood and shouted instructions. The fire appears to have started near a stove in a rear room. Flames have climbed a wall and entered the ceiling space. Smoke fills the corridor. A firefighter crawls low, where the air is clearer, and reaches a bedroom door. Inside, an elderly man is confused and unable to walk quickly. The firefighter lifts him carefully and carries him toward the stairs. Outside, neighbours form a path through the snow. No one has been asked to do this. They simply move. The search for a hydrant begins. The nearest one is buried beneath a drift and marked only by a broom handle tied with red cloth. 2 residents point toward it. Firefighters dig rapidly, striking metal beneath the snow. The hydrant cap is frozen. A wrench slips once, then catches. The connection is made. Water surges into the hose, and several men pull the heavy line toward the entrance. Snow clings to the canvas. The hose grows rigid in the cold. Scholars disagree over how much winter firefighting success in the middle 20th century depends on formal planning and how much depends on neighbourhood assistance. Department records emphasise draining and discipline. Personal accounts often highlight residents who clear paths, locate hydrants, carry equipment, and guide crews through blocked streets. The truth stands in the cooperation between both. Flames glow behind the upper window. Then the glass breaks. A burst of sparks rises into the snow, briefly bright as a shower of stars. The wind catches them, but the falling snow dampens most before they reach nearby roofs. Firefighters enter the rear room. Water strikes burning plaster and timber with a violent hiss. Steam fills the space. Charred pieces of ceiling fall, but the men continue working beneath the weight of heat, smoke, and soaked clothing. Outside, familiars wait in silence. A child asks whether the building will disappear. His mother says no. She does not know, but certainty is sometimes a form of shelter. The fire is contained before it spreads through the roof. One apartment suffers heavy damage, several others fill with smoke and water. The structure remains standing. The exhausted firefighters descend. Ice forms along their coat sleeves. Helmets shine with frozen spray. Their gloves are stiff. One man removes a glove and discovers that his fingers are trembling, though whether from cold or strain is impossible to say. Another alarm reaches the engine. A chimney fire. Then a report of smoke from a store basement. The night offers no rest. Across the city, fire crews face similar obstacles. Engines become trapped. Ladders must be carried by hand. Hydrants vanish beneath drifts. Telephone calls arrive from frightened households using fireplaces, stoves, and improvised heaters with little experience. A council decree proves that officials repeatedly warned residents to keep flammable objects away from open flames and to maintain clear chimneys. Yet desperate warmth invites careless decisions. Blankets are hung too near stoves. Wood is stacked beside hearths. Ashes are placed in boxes before they are fully cold. The firefighters know this. They also know that warnings cannot erase the cold. You stand beside the engine as the crew prepares to move again. Neighbours bring coffee in thick cups. Someone offers sandwiches wrapped in paper. A firefighter drinks quickly, steam rising around his face, then returns the cup with a quiet word of thanks. The engine bell begins ringing once more. Shovels lift. Hands push against the rear. The machine moves into the storm, carrying weary men toward another glow hidden somewhere beyond the snow. You enter a hospital through doors that never seem to stop opening. Each gust carries snow into the lobby. Orderlies hurry forward with blankets. Nurses guide frightened families toward wooden benches. A porter pushes a wheelchair across the tiled floor while another man spreads coarse salt near the entrance to keep hurried feet from slipping. The building remains bright, warm, and awake. Outside, the city struggles to move. Inside, every corridor carries motion. You hear telephones ringing behind desks. Metal carts rattle over polished floors. Rubber soles squeak beneath white uniforms. Somewhere beyond a pair of swinging doors, a newborn begins grinning with impressive determination, apparently unaware that the weather has complicated almost everything except arrival. Hospital staff members report for duty and then discover they cannot easily leave. A nurse who planned to finish her shift before supper is still working near midnight. A young doctor rests for 10 minutes in an unused examination room, his folded coat serving as a pillow. Kitchen workers prepare additional trays because stranded employees must be fed along with patients. Records confirm that hospitals during severe winter storms often relied on staff already inside the building when replacement workers could not arrive. Nurses, physicians, technicians, cooks, cleaners, and maintenance crews remained for extended shifts, sometimes sleeping in offices, lounges, or empty patient rooms. You feel the weight of that responsibility in every hallway. Illness does not wait for roads to clear. Babies do not consult weather forecasts. People still suffer chest pain, falls, fever, breathing trouble, and household accidents. The storm does not create every emergency, but it makes each one harder to reach. An ambulance attempts to cross a broad avenue. Its warning bell sounds through the snow. The driver can barely see the next intersection. Two attendants sit beside a patient wrapped in heavy blankets, listening as the vehicle slips from side to side. The ambulance stops when it encounters a drift too deep to cross. The crew climbs out with shovels. A police officer appears from a nearby doorway. Then several residents join them. Snow is cleared from beneath the tyres while the patient waits inside, surrounded by the smell of wool, leather and antiseptic. The engine drains. The ambulance lurches forward. Every block becomes a contest between urgency and winter. At another location, an ambulance cannot approach the building at all. Attendants carry a stretcher down a narrow hand-cleared path. Snow presses against their legs. The patient lies beneath blankets and a canvas cover, seeing only the white sky and the concerned faces leaning above. You follow them into the emergency department. The room is crowded. Some patients have fallen while shoveling, others have slipped on hidden ice. Several suffer from cold exposure after spending too long outdoors. Delivery worker has injured his shoulder while pushing a stalled truck. An elderly woman arrives weak and chilled because the heat failed in her apartment. Nurses move from one person to another, measuring temperature, checking breathing, cleaning cuts, and deciding who needs treatment most urgently. Their voices remain low and firm. Calm becomes a tool. One curious footnote from hospital life in this period is the widespread use of glass thermometers that require patience, steady hands, and careful cleaning. In a crowded emergency room, these slim instruments must be tracked closely. Dropping one produces a small silver disaster across the floor and a great deal of disapproving silence. You pass a supply room where workers count bandages, bottled fluids, medicine, clean linens, and oxygen equipment. Deliveries are delayed, nothing is yet exhausted, but careful use becomes essential. The hospital kitchen faces its own challenge. Milk deliveries have slowed. Fresh produce is limited. Bread must be portioned. The cooks adapt with soups, oatmeal, canned fruit, potatoes, and large pots of coffee. Patients receive what they need, while exhausted staff members eat whenever a few spare minutes appear. Arguments remain divided over whether large urban hospitals of the 1950s were better prepared for weather emergencies because they maintained more supplies on site, or less prepared because communication and transportation systems were more limited. Some historians emphasize durable local networks and experienced staff. Others point toward shortages, delayed transfers, and the absence of modern emergency planning. You enter a maternity ward where the storm creates an unusual mixture of tension and joy. A woman in labour arrived only minutes before the avenue became nearly impassable. Her husband stands beside the bed, still wearing snow on his trouser cuffs. A nurse gently orders him to remove his wet coat. He obeys immediately. In the waiting area, another husband walks back and forth so often that a groove might appear in the floor before morning. He asks the same question each time a nurse passes. The nurse offers the same patient answer. Birth continues while the storm seals the windows in white. In a surgical wing, the power flickers. Every face turns toward the lights. The hospital generator responds, and the brightness steadies. Maintenance workers descend to the machinery rooms to inspect fuel, belts, switches, and wiring. Their work is quiet but vital. A hospital without power loses far more than light. You hear the generator through the basement walls, a heavy dependable vibration. An engineer checks the fuel supply and calculates how long it can run. He writes the figures on a clipboard, then checks them again. Numbers seem more serious during a storm. Upstairs, volunteers fold blankets and carry water. A local minister sits beside a patient whose family cannot reach the hospital. A receptionist uses the telephone to reassure relatives that their loved ones are safe. Calls come from every borough. Some connect, some fail. When a line finally opens, a nurse may have only a few seconds to say that a patient is stable before static swallows the conversation. In one ward, children watch the snow through tall windows. A nurse gives them paper and pencils, and they draw ambulances with enormous wheels capable of climbing every drift. One child adds wings. No one corrects the design. The corridors grow quieter near dawn, but the work does not stop. Staff members lower their voices, lights dim in patient rooms, blankets are adjusted, charts are updated, coffee cools in forgotten cups. A nurse pauses beside a window and studies the buried street below. She has no idea when she will reach home. Then a bell sounds from a nearby room. She turns at once. You watch her walk down the corridor, tired but steady, while the hospital continues breathing through the storm, holding its doors open for anyone who can still reach them. A knock sounds against a wooden door just as the wind presses hard against the building. You hear it once, then again, slower this time. The family inside pauses around the kitchen table. No one expects a visitor. The hallway has been quiet for hours, and the street beyond the window is almost hidden beneath moving snows. The father lifts the latch. A young woman stands outside with a child wrapped in a wool coat. No, clings to her hat, her shoulders, and the edge of the blanket she holds around the child. Their automobile has stalled several blocks away. They tried to reach relatives nearby, but the address led them to a dark building with locked doors. The father steps aside. No long discussion follows. The woman enters. Warm air touches her face and she closes her eyes for a moment. Throughout the city, doors begin opening in this simple way. A delivery driver, unable to continue his route, is invited into a bakery. A railway worker stranded far from home sleeps on a sofa in the apartment of a man he met only that evening. An elderly tenant crosses a hallway to share a warmer room with neighbours whose names she has known for years, but whose lives have remained mostly private. The storm turns distance into a strange and uneven thing. A close relative may be impossible to reach, while an unknown person stands only a few feet away, cold and in need. You move into a crowded parlour where coats hang from every available hook. Wet hats rest on newspapers spread across the floor. People sit on chairs, stools, cushions, and wooden crates. The room contains shop workers, 2 office clerks, a student, a mother with an infant, and a cab driver whose vehicle is buried near the corner. Under ordinary circumstances, these people might have passed one another without a word. Now they share soup. Records from winter emergencies confirm that churches, schools, hotels, restaurants, and private homes often became temporary shelters when travel failed. Formal relief centres played an important role, but many people found safety through ordinary residents who opened rooms, kitchens, and hallways to strangers. Hospitality does not always appear graceful. One host worries that there are not enough blankets. Another has only 3 cups, so coffee is served in bowls. A family with a small table feeds visitors in turns. Someone offers dry socks that are far too large. The recipient accepts them with gratitude and folds the excess around each ankle. In a narrow apartment, 6 unexpected guests gather around a stove. The hostess adds water to a pot of stew, then adds potatoes, onions, and another pinch of salt. The meal grows thinner but larger, which is one of the oldest forms of practical generosity. A curious household custom appears when visitors are asked to place wet shoes near the entrance and wear whatever indoor footwear can be found. One businessman spends the evening in polished trousers and bright floral slippers. Nobody mentions this until the room feels safe enough for laughter. You notice how quickly strangers begin telling one another small pieces of their lives. The cab driver speaks about his daughter, who has recently learned to read. The student explains that he is studying engineering but secretly wants to write music. The elderly woman describes the neighbourhood as it looked when horse carts still passed beneath her window. These stories are not dramatic. That is why they matter. They fill the hours and make the crowded room feel less accidental. Outside, another knock sounds. This time it is a policeman guiding 2 men who became separated from their work crew. The apartment is already full, yet space is created. A chair moves closer to the wall, a blanket is divided, someone clears a place near the stoves. The host looks around the room and realises that nearly every surface is occupied. He smiles and says there is always room for one more. This is not literally true, but kindness often begins with an unreasonable sentence. Arguments among social historians split over whether the disasters reveal the true character of a community or temporarily suspend ordinary behaviour. Some believe crisis uncovers deep habits of mutual aid. Others argue that generosity rises because normal routines vanish and people understand that they may soon need help themselves. Either way, the result can still be a warm room and an open door. You enter a hotel lobby where stranded travellers sleep beneath coats and newspapers. The manager has stopped asking for room numbers. Bell attendants carry blankets from storage. The kitchen prepares sandwiches until the bread runs low. A woman sits upright in an armchair, holding her handbag tightly even while asleep. A porter gently places a folded towel behind her neck. Near the entrance, 2 men take turns watching for anyone crossing the street through the storm. Visibility is poor. A person can appear suddenly from the white air, bent forward and nearly exhausted. When someone reaches the door, hands pull it open quickly. Warmth escapes. Snow blows in. The stranger enters. The door closes again. In a church basement, volunteers arrange cots beneath plain electric lights. Folding tables hold cups, bowls, candles, and stacks of donated clothing. A priest writes names on a sheet of paper, so relatives can later learn who found shelter there. One man refuses a cot because he thinks someone older may need it. An older woman refuses it because she says he looks worse than she does. They argue politely until a volunteer finds another cot and ends the dispute. You hear a baby crying near the back wall. Several people look up at once, and the mother appears embarrassed, but an older woman moves beside her and begins humming softly. A shopkeeper brings warm water. A young couple folds coats into a small cushion. The child quiets. So does the room. Hospitality crosses the lines that ordinary life often keeps firmly in place. Class, religion, occupation, neighbourhood, and accent matter less when everyone is listening to the same wind. Differences do not disappear, but they lose some of their authority. In one apartment, a disagreement begins over politics. The hostess ends it by placing a loaf of bread on the table and asking who would like the last slice. Every hand withdraws. The argument disappears. Near the window, a boy watches snow bury the steps. He asks whether all the visitors will stay forever. His mother says only until it is safe to leave. He considers this and then brings out a box of wooden toys. The adults continue speaking quietly while the child arranges a small town across the carpet. Houses stand close together. Streets curve between them. Tiny figures gather inside the largest building. You watch the room settle into a shared silence. Some people sleep. Some keep watch. Some stare into the stove and think about families they cannot reach. Yet no one is alone. Across the city, doors remain unlocked longer than usual. Hallway lights stay on, soup stretches farther, blankets cover more than one pair of shoulders. The storm closes roads, stops trains, and buries familiar paths, but every open door creates another kind of passage through the night. The radio glows in the corner like a small amber window. You sit close enough to hear the soft hum behind the wooden cabinet. The dial shines with tiny station markings. A hand turns the knob slowly, passing through bursts of static, distant music, clipped voices, and sudden silence. Then a familiar announcer comes through clearly. His voice is steady. That steadiness matters. He reports blocked roads, delayed trains, closed schools, and emergency shelters opening across the city. He repeats instructions carefully, allowing listeners time to remember each detail, keep unnecessary travel to a minimum, check on elderly neighbours. Use fireplaces and portable heaters with caution, leave telephone lines free for urgent calls. The words travel through kitchens, bedrooms, hotel lobbies, police stations, firehouses, and hospital wards. They enter rooms where people have no other reliable connection to the larger city. You hear the storm described block by block. An avenue is closed by abandoned vehicles. A train remains delayed near a frozen switch. A church basement has room for more stranded travellers. A hospital requests additional blood donors once transportation improves. The information is practical, but beneath it runs something more comforting. The announcer proves that someone else is awake. Records confirm that radio remained one of the fastest and most dependable ways to reach large urban audiences during weather emergencies in the 1950s. Television ownership had grown rapidly, but radio sets were still common in homes, shops, automobiles, and workplaces. Any could continue operating on batteries if household power failed. You move into a darkened apartment where the electric lights have gone out. Candles stand in saucers. A flashlight rests on the table. The battery radio continues speaking. Every person in the room turns toward it, though there is nothing to see except a cloth speaker and a narrow glowing dial. The voice becomes a presence, almost another guest seated among them. A weather report follows. The snowfall may ease for a time, but strong winds are expected to continue. Drifting will remain severe. Temperatures will stay low. No one cheers. Still, the room relaxes slightly because uncertainty has been given shape. A curious footnote from the period is the way some listeners marked important radio announcements directly on newspapers, grocery lists, or even wallpaper scraps when no proper paper could be found. One family writes a shelter address on the back of a recipe for apple cake. The cake may wait, the address cannot. You turn the dial again. Another station is playing soft orchestral music between emergency bulletins. Violins rise gently through the static. A trumpet follows. For several minutes, the storm seems to move farther from the room. Music changes the atmosphere without twinging the beds. A frightened child falls asleep. An exhausted worker closes his eyes. A woman knitting near the window begins moving her needles more slowly. Then the announcer returns with another update. Listeners are asked to report dangerous conditions only when necessary. Rumours are spreading about bridge closures, fuel shortages and power failures. Some are true, others are exaggerated. The station attempts to separate one from the other. Rumours travel quickly because fear dislikes empty space. A man in a diner claims that every tunnel is closed. A customer at the counter says the harbour has frozen solid. Someone else insists that the storm will last for 4 more days. The radio corrects what it can. No, not every tunnel is closed. No, the harbour has not frozen solid. No official forecast predicts 4 more days of snow. The corrections are calm, almost gentle. Nobody is scolded for believing too much. During a storm, imagination works overtime without asking permission. Scholars continue to argue over whether radio broadcasters in major emergencies served mainly as neutral messengers or as emotional anchors for the public. Some historians emphasize the value of accurate instructions, others point toward tone, repetition, familiar voices, and the reassuring rhythm of regular programming. Both functions seem inseparable when the outside world has disappeared behind white windows. You listen as callers reach the station. A grocer reports that his shop remains open for nearby residents. A nurse asks whether any driver with chains can transport a replacement worker. A man searching for his brother leaves a name and neighbourhood. A woman thanks strangers who helped push her automobile from an intersection. The station cannot solve every problem, but it gives these voices somewhere to go. In one crowded shelter, everyone grows quiet when a list of names is read aloud. People found safe at hotels, workers resting at transit stations, families sheltered in churches, travellers waiting in public buildings. Each name carries a small release of tension somewhere in the city. A mother hears her son mentioned and covers her mouth with both hands. A husband recognises his wife's name and lowers his head. The people around them understand without explanation. The radio also carries humour. An announcer reports that one neighbourhood resident has attempted to clear a sidewalk using a garden rake. He adds that the rake lost the argument. Another describes a taxi driver who charged no fare because the trip covered only half a block before the vehicle became stuck. The jokes are mild. That is enough. Laughter enters rooms that have grown too serious. You hear an advertisement begin, cheerful and polished, before someone at the station interrupts it with an urgent notice. The contrast feels strange. Ordinary life is still trying to sell soap and coffee while emergency crews search for open roads. Yet even advertisements offer comfort in their own accidental way. They sound normal. Normality becomes precious. Near midnight, some stations reduce music and increase public announcements. Operators remain at switchboards, reporters telephone from the hospitals, railway terminals and police offices. Engineers watch transmitters and backup equipment. A station that leaves the air creates more than silence. It creates uncertainty. Technicians check vacuum tubes, wiring, generators, and fuel. Their work happens behind closed doors, unseen by listeners who hear only a clear voice and assume clarity comes easily. In one studio, an announcer removes his jacket and loosens his collar. He has been speaking for hours. A cup of coffee sits untouched beside the microphone. He reads another message. A shelter needs blankets. A pharmacy will remain open until morning. A missing child has been found safe with neighbours. His voice does not break. Still, he pauses for one extra breath before continuing. You return to the room with the glowing radio. The fire has settled into red embers. Several people are asleep beneath blankets. One person remains awake, listening for the next bulletin. Static rises and falls like distant surf. Then music begins again, slow and soft, filling the quiet spaces between worry and rest. Across the city, thousands of listeners hear the same melody. They cannot see one another. They do not know one another. But for a few peaceful minutes, they are gathered around the same invisible hearth. The coal scuttle makes a hollow sound when it is lifted. You notice the sound immediately. Earlier, it felt heavy enough to require both hands. Now it rises too easily from the floor. Only a thin layer of black pieces remains at the bottom, shifting with a dry scrape against the metal. Near another hearth, the woodpile has shrunk to 6 logs. In a basement furnace room, the oil gauge rests lower than anyone expected. Warmth is still present, but it has acquired a price measured in hours. Families begin counting fuel with the attention usually given to money. A large log may burn slowly, but it must be saved for the coldest part of the night. Small pieces catch quickly, yet disappear before the room has fully warmed. Coal gives lasting heat, though every shovelful removed from the bin makes the remaining supply easier to see. You sit beside a fireplace where the flames have been deliberately lowered. The room feels different at once. People keep their coats on. Blankets cover knees and shoulders. Chairs move closer together until everyone forms a tight half circle around the hearth. The far corners darken and cool. A man studies the embers and waits before adding wood. His daughter asks why he's letting the fire become so small. He tells her that a quiet fire can last a long time. She nods, though she watches the shrinking glow with suspicion. Records confirm that many New York households during the middle 20th century depended on regular deliveries of coal or heating oil. Severe snow could interrupt those routes by blocking streets, trapping trucks, and preventing workers from reaching storage yards. A family with adequate heat one evening might face real uncertainty if roads remained closed. The problem grows more serious in buildings where central boilers serve many apartments. A superintendent calculates the remaining coal in the basement. He knows the furnace cannot be allowed to die completely. Restarting a cold system takes time, and frozen pipes may burst if temperatures fall too far. He reduces the heat. Radiators that once clanged with enthusiasm become merely warm. Tenants feel the change within an hour. Doors open along the hallway. Question begin. How much fuel remains? When will another delivery arrive? Is the boiler failing? The superintendent answers as calmly as he can. The boiler is working. The fuel is being conserved. Everyone should close unused rooms and keep windows sealed. He does not mention that the delivery truck has not been heard from. You move through apartments where families begin choosing which spaces deserve warmth. The parlour is closed. The spare bedroom is closed. The dining room is abandoned except when food is served. Life gathers in kitchens, where cooking adds heat, and in living rooms, where one stove or fireplace can serve many people. Beds are moved. Mattresses lie across floors. Children sleep close together beneath layered blankets while adults take turns checking the fire. A curious footnote from winter households involves warming bricks near a hearth, wrapping them in cloth, and placing them at the foot of a bed. The method offers useful heat, provided the brick is not too hot and the wrapping is thick. Otherwise, a person may awaken with warm feet, scorched sheets, and a complicated explanation. Hot water bottles are filled where kettles still boil. Some families use heated stones, others warm blankets near radiators, then hurry them into bedrooms before the heat escapes. Every small comfort becomes carefully timed, or you hear a knock at a basement door. 2 tenants arrive carrying broken packing crates from a nearby shop. The wood is rough and full of nails, but it is dry. They pull the boards apart with hammers and remove the metal pieces before feeding the scraps into a small stove. Another neighbour contributes an old wooden shelf. Someone offers a damaged stool. One man suggests burning a stack of unpaid bills, but the paper produces little lasting heat and no lasting financial improvement. The jokes grow thinner as the temperature falls. No agreement has been reached among historians about how often urban families resorted to burning furniture during severe storms. Personal memories describe chairs, boxes, shelving, and broken cabinets entering desperate hearths. Official records rarely capture such private decisions. Memory may enlarge the drama, yet the logic remains painfully simple when fuel is scarce and cold is immediate. In a corner shop, the remaining bundles of firewood have already been sold. Customers ask about coal, none remains. The owner has candles, matches, canned food, and several bags of charcoal intended for outdoor cooking. He warns people not to burn charcoal inside because its fumes can kill without warning. Some listen carefully. Others look disappointed. Danger often arrives disguised as a convenient solution. Fire officials repeat warnings through radio broadcasts and neighbourhood patrols. Do not use unvented burners indoors. Do not close dampers while fuel is still burning. Do not leave candles near curtains. Do not place hot ashes in paper containers. The advice sounds simple. Cold makes simplicity harder. You enter a room where an elderly couple has turned off the fire in the bedroom and moved into the kitchen. They sit at a small table wearing hats and gloves. A single gas flame heats soup while a kettle sends steam upward. Their neighbour brings a bucket of coal from his own supply. They refuse at first. He places it beside the stove anyway. The arty amount is not large, but it may provide several hours of warmth. Across the street, where residents organise a shared fuel store. Those with extra wood contribute a log or two. Coal is divided into smaller buckets. Priority goes to homes with infants, older residents, and anyone who is ill. The arrangement is informal. There is no official committee, no printed rule, and no speech. A woman writes apartment numbers on scraps of paper and keeps them inside her coat pocket. A teenager pulls a sled between buildings, carrying fuel beneath a canvas sheet. A retired carpenter splits damaged boards into usable lengths. The sound of his axe rises through the snow. You feel the city learning a new arithmetic. One log may warm 5 people in one room more effectively than 2 people in separate rooms. One kettle can fill several hot water bottles. One warm kitchen can shelter 3 neighbouring families. Comfort becomes collective because isolation wastes heat. Near the fireplace, the last large log is finally placed on the grate. Flames take hold slowly. Everyone watches. No one says that it is the last large piece. The knowledge already sits quietly among them. A mother begins telling a story to the children. Her voice draws their attention from the fire. An uncle repairs a loose button. Someone pours the remaining coffee into smaller cups so each person receives a little. The room is cooler now, yet it feels close and steady. Beyond the walls, fuel trucks remain trapped behind drifts. Storage yards stand full but unreachable. Coal rests in bins across the river. Heating oil waits inside tanks only a few miles away. The distance might be small on a map. Tonight, it's enormous. You hold your hands toward the fading flames and feel each pulse of warmth touch your fingers. The family does not know whether fresh fuel will arrive by morning, so the damper is adjusted. The blankets are drawn tighter. Conversation becomes soft. Every ember is guarded as though it contains a piece of the night itself. Before dawn, the city begins moving through the labour of people most residents rarely notice. You hear the scrape of steel against frozen pavement as transit workers clear railway switches by hand. Snow is packed into narrow spaces around the rails, and ice grips the moving parts. A crew bends beneath lantern light, using long tools, salt, and steady blows to free the mechanism. Their gloves are wet, their shoulders ache. Still, the switch must move. A train filled with stranded passengers waits somewhere beyond the darkness. The workers know that every cleared section of track may return hundreds of people to their homes. That knowledge gives purpose to each slow strike. Records confirm that winter railway operations in the middle 20th century depended heavily on manual labour. Crews cleared tracks, heated switches, inspected power lines, and removed ice from equipment. Machines helped, but human hands remained essential when frozen parts refused to respond. You walk beside a maintenance worker carrying a lantern along the track. The flame trembles behind glass. He studies every rail joint, searching for cracks or packed ice. Snow reaches above his boots. The wind pushes at his back, then turns and meets him directly. He continues. Below the streets, subway employees inspect tunnels, platforms as signals and electrical systems. The underground lines remain protected from much of the snow, but entrances clog, outdoor sections freeze, and water carried inside by passengers spreads across stairs and platforms. Porters spread sand. Electricians examine cables. Station agents answer questions from crowds who have been waiting for hours. Their voices grow tired before their duty ends. At a bus depot, mechanics work beneath weak overhead lights. Engines must be kept warm. Batteries lose strength in the cold. Brakes collect ice. Chains must be fitted to tyres before another vehicle attempts the streets. A mechanic lies beneath a bus on a wooden board, tightening a loose connection, while melted snow drips steadily onto his coat. He does not complain. He saves his complaints for machinery that deserves them. A curious footnote from winter transit work is that some crews carried small metal lunchboxes near heated equipment so their food would not freeze. This arrangement occasionally produced soup that tasted faintly of engine oil. Though hunger encouraged generous standards, you move toward a power station where turbines turn behind thick walls. The city may appear quiet, but its demand for electricity has increased. Lights remain on in shelters, hospitals operate through the night, radios carry emergency reports, pumps move water, elevators serve tall buildings. Engineers watch gauges and record readings in careful rows. A sudden drop in pressure could darken whole neighbourhoods. A rise in demand could strain already tired equipment. One worker walks through the machinery hall listening for changes in sound. He knows the normal rhythm of every motor. A strange vibration, a sharp knock, or a change in pitch may signal trouble before an instrument does. His attention becomes a form of protection. Outside, utility crews travel in heavy trucks carrying ladders, cable, tools, and replacement parts. A tree limb has fallen across a power line. Another wire hangs low beneath the ice. A transformer has failed near a row of apartment buildings. The trucks cannot always reach the damaged places. When roads close, the crews continue on foot, dragging equipment through deep snow. You watch two linemen raise a ladder against a pole while wind pulls at their coats. One climbs slowly. Ice coats the wood. His partner holds the base and looks upward. The damaged chaos sparks once. Yes, the light is brief and blue. The worker waits, tests the line, and begins the repairs. Scholars remain divided over whether the public memory of severe storms gives enough attention to infrastructure workers. Some historians argue that dramatic rescues dominate the stories because they are easy to picture. Others note that countless quiet repairs prevent larger disasters without ever becoming famous. Restored wire creates no parade. A functioning pump receives no applause. You pass a water department crew opening a frozen street valve. The metal cover is buried. They locate it using old measurements taken from the corner of a building. One man counts his steps, another probes the snow with a rod. At last, steel strikes steel. They dig. The valve controls water flowing toward a damaged main. If they cannot close it, pressure may fall across several blocks, and leaking water may freeze into a dangerous sheet beneath the snow. The workers fit a long key into the opening and turn together. Nothing happens. They reset their grip. The valve moves slightly, then again, patience succeeds where force alone cannot. Elsewhere, sanitation workers face streets filled with stalled automobiles, fallen branches, broken crates, and mountains of snow. Ordinary collection has stopped, but dangerous obstructions must still be removed. Snowplow drivers push into avenues that close behind them almost as quickly as they open. The plow blade strikes hidden ice with a deep shudder. The driver grips the wheel and peers through a windshield streaked with snow. A second plow follows, then a truck carrying salt. Progress is measured in blocks. At a police station, officers return from patrol with snow crusted on their coats. Others prepare to leave. Maps lie across tables marked with blocked streets, shelter locations, medical calls, and buildings requiring checks. Telephone operators connect urgent messages. A sergeant assigns foot patrols where automobiles cannot pass. He reminds each officer to check basement apartments, elderly residents, and homes that have gone dark. The work is repetitive. That does not make it less important. You follow a patrolman into an alley where a woman has reported a strange smell. He enters the building and finds a faulty heater releasing fumes. Windows are opened. Residents are moved into the hallway. A utility worker is called. No flames appear. No crowd gathers. Yet several lives may have been saved by a complaint that seemed minor. At a bakery, workers begin preparing bread even though deliveries remain uncertain. Flour rises in pale clouds above wooden tables. Ovens warm the room. Loaves are shaped, placed in rows, and carried toward the heat. The baker knows he may not be able to send them far, but the surrounding neighborhood will need food when doors open. Milk processing plants, warehouses, telephone exchanges, newspaper offices, and fuel depots continue with reduced crews. Some workers sleep on floors between shifts. Others remain because nobody can replace them. The city survives through this stubborn refusal to leave essential work unfinished. You stand near a telephone exchange where rows of operators sit beneath bright lamps. Cords connect one call to another. Hospitals request supplies. Families search for missing relatives. Officials report damaged lines. Operators repeat instructions clearly, even when their hands grow stiff and their voices become hoarse. One woman removes her headset for a moment and presses her fingers against her temples. Then another signal flashes. She returns to the call. By morning, a few trains begin moving more steadily. Several dark buildings regain light. A leaking main is closed. A hospital receives fresh oxygen cylinders. A plough opens one lane toward a firehouse. These successes appear small against the scale of the storm, but a city is held together by the small successes. You hear engines starting in depots, bells ringing in stations, and tools striking frozen metal. The workers continue beneath falling snow, not because the city has recovered, but because each repaired line, cleared rail, opened valve, and answered call keeps it breathing. Dawn arrives without warmth. You notice the light first as a faint greyness behind the windows. It does not brighten the room so much as reveal its tiredness. Candles have burned low. Ash rests beneath the hearth. Cups stand unfinished on tables. Blankets cover sleeping figures in chairs and along the floor. Outside, the city waits beneath a pale sky. The storm has not completely withdrawn. Fine snow still moves through the air, lighter than before, but persistent. Wind lifts powder from rooftops and sends it curling over chimneys. The falling flakes are fewer, yet the streets remain hidden beneath everything already delivered during the long night. Morning usually restores confidence. Shops open, Trains fill. Delivery carts begin their routes. People step into familiar schedules. This morning, familiar schedules seem almost imaginary. You pull a curtain aside and study the avenue. Nothing moves at first. Parked automobiles lie beneath rounded drifts. Some are visible only because a dark window or chrome bumper breaks through the white surface. A bus stands abandoned near the intersection, tilted slightly toward the curb. Snow has gathered against its doors, sealing it in place. The sidewalks are narrow trenches between high banks. Where no one has dug, there are no sidewalks at all. Records confirm that the hours following a major snowstorm can be more dangerous than the snowfall itself. Roads remain blocked, temperatures fall, weakened branches collapse, and hidden ice forms beneath loose powder. The sky may appear calmer while the ground becomes more treacherous. You step outside. The cold feels clean and severe. Every breath catches in your throat. Snow creaks beneath your boots, a dry, compressed sound that signals falling temperature. The surface holds your weight for one step, then breaks beneath the next. Walking requires constant attention. Across the street, a man begins digging around his front steps. He works slowly. His shoulders move beneath a thick coat, but the shovel blade strikes something hard below. The lower layer has frozen. What looked soft from the window has become a heavy crust. He raises the blade again. The work will take hours. A curious footnote of winter mornings is that residents sometimes used kitchen utensils when proper tools could not be found. Roasting pans became scoops, brooms became snow pushers, coal shovels left the furnace room and entered public service. One woman attacks a drift with a large metal serving spoon, which is brave, determined, and unlikely to impress the drift. You hear the first sounds of damage. A branch cracks under the weight of snow and falls across a garden fence. Farther away, glass breaks as ice slides from a roof. A gutter tears loose from a building and hangs at an angle, tapping against brick in the wind. The storm has changed from an event in the sky into a burden resting on every surface. Roof crews begin inspecting older buildings. Snow is heavy where it has compacted and absorbed moisture. Flat roofs demand particular attention. Workers climb ladders carefully, tied with ropes, and push accumulation away from drains. Below, residents are warned to stand clear. A roof can appear peaceful while carrying enormous strain. No agreement has been reached among architectural historians about how consistently property owners of the period understood snow load risks. Some maintained roofs carefully and acted quickly. Others trusted old construction, delayed repairs, or underestimated the weight gathering overhead. Winter exposes every decision that seemed harmless during gentler weather. You turn toward the railway. The platform is crowded with people who arrived hoping that daylight would restore service. They stand beneath scarves and hats, holding briefcases and lunch tins. An employee explains that only limited trains are running. No one knows exactly when the next one will arrive. A few passengers return home. Others remain. Workplaces may be closed, but many people have not received confirmation. Telephone lines are still crowded. Radio reports list closures, yet information travels unevenly. A factory worker worries that absence will cost him wages. A shop assistant fears losing her position. A clerk insists that his office expects everyone to report, although he has no evidence beyond his employer's personality. The morning contains practical anxiety. Warmth is not the only need. People require income, food, medicine, and news. At a corner store, the owner unlocks the door and finds a line already waiting. Customers stand quietly while he surveys the shelves. Bread is scarce, milk has not arrived, eggs are nearly gone. He limits purchases so more families can receive something. A woman objects. Then she looks at the people behind her and accepts one loaf instead of two. The cash register opens and closes. Coins sound unusually loud in the quiet shop. You move toward a school where the doors remain shut. A handwritten notice confirms closure. Children gather nearby, pleased at first, but their celebration lacks the wild energy expected from an unexpected holiday. The snow is too deep for easy play, the wind remains too sharp. Parents call them back indoors after only a short time. The day off has become another day inside. In hospitals, the morning shift does not replace the night shift in full. Some workers arrive on foot after long journeys. Others cannot reach the building at all. Staff members wash, drink fresh coffee, and continue. In police stations, maps gain new marks. Reports arrive of collapsed awnings, frozen pipes, stranded residents, and dangerous heaters. Firehouses inspect hoses stiffened by ice. Utility crews receive more calls than they can answer quickly. Morning reveals problem, darkness concealed. You pass a basement apartment where water has begun seeping under the door. A pipe cracked during the night. The resident moves clothing and bedding onto chairs while neighbours search for the shut-off valve. Water spreads across the floor, then begins freezing near the entrance. One person carries buckets. Another wraps the damaged pipe with cloth. A third runs for the building superintendent. There is no single dramatic rescue, only many hands preventing greater loss. The lights strengthen. It shows the full height of the drifts, the broken branches, the stalled vehicles, and the exhaustion on people's faces. It also reveals smoke rising from chimneys and narrow paths connecting one doorway to another. The city is visible again, but not restored. That distinction settles over every neighbourhood. You stand at the corner and listen. A shovel scrapes. A truck engine attempts to start. A church bell sounds the hour. Somewhere, a child laughs as snow falls from a branch onto an adult's hat. The laughter is brief and welcome. Dawn has not brought relief. It has brought a clearer understanding of the work still waiting beneath the pale winter sky. Shovels begin moving in rhythm along the block. You hear metal striking packed snow, then the soft scrape of each load being pushed aside. One doorway opens, then another. Residents step outside carrying whatever tools they possess. Some bring broad snow shovels, others carry coal scoops, garden knees, spades, brooms, wooden hull boards, and dented kitchen pans. The work starts close to home. Each householder clears its own stairs. Then someone opens a path toward the neighbouring door. Another person widens the route toward the corner. Soon the separate efforts meet. A narrow passage stretches along the building fronts, uneven but usable. People walk through it carefully, keeping close to the walls where the snow is less deep. Those carrying food, medicine, or fuel receive space to pass. No official order creates the need is visible enough. You join a group near an intersection where a deep ridge blocks access to a small grocery. The shop still has canned food and several sacks of flour, but customers cannot reach the entrance easily. 3 men dig from one side. 2 women work from the other. A teenager uses a broom to clear loose powder after the heavier snow is removed. An older resident stands nearby with hot coffee and watches for signs that anyone is growing weak from the cold. Records confirm that neighbourhood snow clearing in the middle 20th century often depended on residents and local businesses working beside municipal crews. Ploughs could open main roads, but steps, alleys, hydrants, shop entrances, and narrow residential paths still required countless hours of manual labour. You feel the physical strain quickly. Snow that looks soft from a distance becomes heavy when lifted repeatedly. The lower layers contain ice and slush. Every shovelful pulls at the shoulders and lower back. Gloves grow damp, fingers stiffen around wooden handles. People learn to work in turns. One person digs, one rests, one carries the snow farther away so the path does not collapse back into itself. The effort becomes organised without much conversation. A curious footnote appears when residents begin marking cleared routes with pieces of coloured cloth. Red fabric signals a fire hydrant, blue ribbon marks a cellar entrance, a striped scarf tied to a fence warns of a hidden stairwell. Fashion has been recruited by public safety, and it performs the duty without complaint. At the far end of the block, several children help in smaller ways. They carry light loads in buckets. They sweep steps. They gather scattered tools. One boy proudly announces that he has cleared an entire path, though the path is only wide enough for a cat with excellent balance. Nobody corrects him. His achievement is treated with full seriousness. You move toward a buried automobile where the owner has been digging alone for nearly an hour. Snow surrounds the wheels and fills the space beneath the chassis. Each time he clears one side, loose powder slides back. Two strangers stop to help. One digs near the rear tyres, another rocks the vehicle gently while the owner turns the steering wheel. Wooden boards are placed beneath the tyres. The engine starts. For a moment, nothing happens. Then the automobile moves forward several feet. All three men cheer as though they have launched an ocean liner. The victory is small but contagious. Nearby residents begin helping with another trapped vehicle. Someone brings sand, someone finds rope, someone directs traffic even though only one automobile is moving. Arguments among social historians remain unsettled over whether shared labour during disasters creates lasting community bonds or only brief cooperation. Some believe working side by side changes how neighbours see one another. Others argue that ordinary distance returns once the crisis passes, yet during the hours of digging, names are learned, doors are opened, and private lives become less private. You enter a courtyard where snow has blocked access to several basement apartments. Residents form a line. One person cuts into the drift. Another lifts the stove. A third carries it in a large metal basin toward an open area. The process is slow, but each movement clears a little more light from the lower windows. Inside one apartment, a family waits beside the door. When the final barrier breaks, cold air rushes inward. The family smiles anyway. Freedom feels like a draft. At the church, volunteers organise teams to visit older residents and anyone living alone. Names are written on a chalkboard, routes are assigned by block, each pair carries bread, soup, matches, and a small amount of fuel. The snow makes every journey difficult, but the new paths shorten the distance. You follow two volunteers to a fourth-floor room where an elderly man has remained indoors since the storm began. His heat is weak, and his food supply is nearly gone. They bring him downstairs to a warmer apartment. He insists on carrying his own hat. This becomes important for reasons no one question. In another building, residents discover that the rear exit is sealed by snow. They begin clearing it in case the front entrance becomes unusable. Safety requires more than one way out. A carpenter measures the narrow passage and builds simple wooden steps into the packed drift. His work turns a steep slope into a rough staircase. People test it carefully. It holds. A bakery opens its rear door and distributes bread through the new path. Payment is accepted when possible. Those without money receive smaller loaves without argument. A woman offers to write down the names of those who owe payment. The baker waves her away. He says warm bread should not require paperwork during a storm. The smell drifts across the courtyard. For a moment, everyone works well by. Municipal ploughs finally reach the avenue. Their engines growl against the snow. The broad blades push great waves toward the sides, opening a narrow lane through the centre. Residents step back and watch. The plough passes once, then again. Its work is powerful but incomplete. The snowbanks left behind block several driveways and crossings. Shovels return immediately. Official machinery and neighbourhood labour continue together, neither sufficient without the other. You notice how the block has changed. People call one another by name. Tools are borrowed without formal permission. Coffee moves from door to door. A woman leaves a pot of soup near the entrance for anyone who needs it. A teenager repairs a broken shovel handle with wire and cloth. No one has planned these gestures. They appear because the work demands them. As evening approaches, the path reaches the pharmacy. Another route opens toward the church shelter. A narrow crossing connects both sides of the avenue. The city remains burdened by snow, but movement has returned in fragile lines. You stand at the corner and look at the network carved by hand. It is crooked. It is narrow. It's full of footprints, shovel marks, and patches of ice. Yet it carries food, medicine, fuel, news, and human company. The storm has covered the streets with silence. The neighbourhood answers by digging itself back into connection. The beauty of the snow begins to change when names are attached to its consequences. You hear them quietly at first. A man has collapsed while clearing a roof. An older woman has been found in an apartment where the heat failed. A driver has been injured inside a vehicle trapped beyond the reach of a plough. The reports do not arrive as one great announcement. They appear through telephone calls, hospital lists, police notes, whispered conversations, and worried relatives standing at desks. Each one makes the storm feel less distant. A city can measure snow in inches, wind in miles, and cold in degrees. Human loss refuses such neat calculation. You enter a hospital corridor where relatives wait beneath bright lights. A woman holds her gloves in both hands and twists them slowly. Her husband was brought in after shoveling for several hours. He insisted he was fine until pain spread across his chest. The doctor speaks gently. The woman listens without moving. Nearby, another family waits for news of a teenager injured when a heavy branch fell across a yard. Snow still clings to his coat where it has been folded over a chair. Records confirm that severe winter storms increase deaths and injuries through cold exposure, falls, heart strain, traffic accidents, fire, and delayed medical care. The snow itself is only part of the danger. The effort required to resist it can be equally cruel. You walk through a neighbourhood where residents have begun checking every apartment. One door remains unanswered. A superintendent unlocks it with a master key while two neighbours stand behind him. The room inside is painfully cold. Curtains hang still. A cup rests beside an armchair. An elderly tenant lies beneath several blankets, weak but alive. The neighbours carry her carefully into the hallway. One wraps a coat around her shoulders. Another runs for hot water. No one speaks of how close the silence came to becoming permanent. The rescue brings relief, but it also changes the building. Every closed door now seems to hold a question. People begin knocking more often. They ask whether anyone needs food, medicine, or company. The human cost includes fear that arrives even when tragedy does not. A child wakes at every sound against the window. A mother cannot sleep because her son has not returned from work. A shopkeeper wonders whether his damaged stock will destroy the business he spent 20 years building. A labourer calculates lost wages and knows the rent will still be due. These worries leave no visible mark on the snow. They remain inside the people carrying them. One scandalous aside from winter relief efforts is that dishonest individuals sometimes raised prices for scarce fuel, food, or transportation. A few charged desperate families far more than usual for a small bundle of wood or a short ride. Such behaviour earned public anger, though proof was often difficult to gather during the confusion. Most residents shared what they could. A few saw opportunity. Disaster does not improve every character. It simply reveals more of each one. You pass a damaged tenement where water from firefighting has frozen along the stairway. Families are allowed inside briefly to collect clothing and personal belongings. They move through rooms darkened by smoke and soaked plaster. One woman finds a family photograph beneath fallen debris. The glass is cracked, and the faces remain visible. She presses the frame against her coat and leaves everything else behind. Loss becomes strangely selective. A chair can be replaced. A photograph cannot. In another building, a ceiling has collapsed under leaking water. No one was injured, but the family must leave. Their neighbours offer temporary space. Yet uncertainty follows them down the stairs. Where will they live next week? Who will pay for repairs? Will their belongings survive the damp? The storm may pass from the sky, but its damage enters months and years. Scholars remain divided over how fully official death counts capture the human cost of great storms. Some deaths occur during the snowfall and are recorded immediately. Others follow days later from illness, exhaustion, or interrupted treatment. Historians also debate whether economic loss, displacement, and lasting fear should be counted beside physical casualties. A number can provide clarity. It can also hide a life. You meet a sanitation worker whose hands have been injured by cold after an extended shift. His fingers are bandaged, and he worries less about pain than about whether he can return to work soon. His family depends on his wages. Rest feels like a luxury he cannot afford. A nurse tells him that damaged hands will not heal through stubbornness. He gives her a tired smile. Stubbornness, unfortunately, is the one resource he still possesses in abundance. At a church office, volunteers create lists of people needing longer assistance. Some require medicine, some need temporary housing, some have lost heating fuel, some are searching for relatives. A woman writes each name carefully. Beside every name, she adds an address and a need. The page grows crowded. Charity must become organised if it is to last beyond the first impulse. You hear funeral bells several days into the recovery. Their slow sound travels across roofs where snow is beginning to darken. A small procession moves carefully along a cleared path. The mourners wear black coats and walk close together. There is no dramatic crowd, only family, friends, and a few neighbours. The storm has claimed someone they expected to see again. You stand at a distance and feel the city grow quieter around the bell. The dead are not symbols. They are people who left unfinished meals, unpaid bills, favourite chairs, familiar jokes, and rooms that now feel too large. One family mourns a father, another mourns a grandmother. A firehouse lowers its flag for a worker lost while answering a call. A hospital staff pauses for a colleague who never reached home. The losses remain separate, yet the weather joins them in public memories. Children notice the sadness around them. Adults try to explain without frightening them. They say that storms can be dangerous. They say people must help one another. They avoid details. Still, children understand more than adults imagine. They see empty seats. They hear lowered voices. They notice when laughter stops at the mention of a name. You return to the street where melting has begun along the edges of the snowbanks. Dirty water runs towards drains. Broken branches wait for collection. Windows reopen slightly to emit fresh air. The city appears to be recovering, yet recovery is uneven. One family returns to a warm home. Another has no home to return to. One worker receives full pay. Another loses a week of wages. One patient leaves the hospital. Another bed is quietly stripped and prepared for someone new. The storm does not distribute suffering fairly. It follows weakness in buildings, bodies, systems, and circumstance. As evening settles, candles appear in several windows. Some are placed for prayer, some for remembrance, some simply because electrical repairs remain incomplete. Their light is small against the city, but each flame marks a household refusing to let loss disappear into statistics. You watch the candles steady themselves behind the glass. Snow still covers the ground. The names remain, and beneath the winter silence, the city begins the difficult work of carrying both survival and sorrow at the same time. You begin to notice how memory chooses its own light. The snow was everywhere, yet people speak first about the fire. They remember the orange glow along a brick hearth, the small crack of wood, the smell of smoke clinging to wool coats, and the quiet relief of entering a room where warmth still held its ground. Years later, the storm will remain fixed in family stories, but not always through official totals or weather reports. It will survive in details. A chipped cup passed between strangers, a blanket divided among 3 children, a pair of wet shoes left near a stump, a neighbour arriving with 2 logs under one arm. These ordinary objects become anchors for an extraordinary night. You sit in a parlour where the fire has burned low. The room is calmer now. Several guests have gone home, chairs remain out of place, and cups wait beside a basin to be washed. The air still carries the scent of ash and cooked onions. A woman folds the blankets that sheltered unexpected visitors. She pauses over one, remembering the young mother who arrived carrying a child through the snow. The blanket itself is plain. The memory attached to it is not. Records confirm that personal recollections often preserve disasters differently from official archives. Reports count closures, damage, injuries, and snowfall. Family stories remember who opened a door, who shared food, who remained brave, and who said something foolish enough to make everyone laugh. Both kinds of memory matter. One explains what happened. The other explains what it felt like. You move through neighborhoods where fireplaces are being cleaned, ash is carried into metal containers, chimneys are inspected, soot marks remain above several mantles, quiet evidence of long hours of use. Some families decide to keep more firewood in storage. Others purchase additional blankets. A few finally repair old windows that allowed cold air to enter for years. Practical lessons settle into daily life. Yet the emotional lessons last longer. People who rarely spoke now greet one another by name. A grocer remembers who needed food without payment. A landlord knows which tenant lives alone. A child recognizes the fireman who carried an elderly man from a smoky building. The city returns to its usual speed, but the knowledge remains beneath the routine. A curious footnote appears in family albums. Some residents photograph the drifts, the buried automobiles, and the narrow paths cut through the streets. Others photograph people gathered near fireplaces, though indoor film often produces dark images with blurred faces and bright patches of flame. The photographs are imperfect. That makes them feel honest. Years later, someone will point to a shadowed figure and say, "That was the man from the railway station." Another person will answer, "No, that was the baker." The argument will continue with affection. Scholars bicker over whether public memory romanticizes severe storms by emphasizing unity while softening hardship. Some argue that stories of shared warmth can hide inequality, injury, and loss. Others believe such stories preserve genuine acts of courage that official documents overlook. The tension remains unresolved. A beautiful memory can still contain suffering. A painful night can still contain kindness. You hear the storm retold in a barbershop. One man describes walking 12 blocks through snow that reached his waist. Another insists the drifts were higher than his head. A third listens silently, then says he spent the entire night asleep beside a radiator and remembers almost nothing. His version is less heroic, but perhaps more believable. Memory expands with repetition. Distances grow. Snowbanks rise. Coffee becomes hotter. Rescues become more dramatic. Yet certain details remain unchanged because everyone remembers them the same way. The city was quiet. The windows were white. The fires stayed lit. Children hear these stories at winter dinners. They ask whether the snow truly covered every automobile. They ask whether people were afraid. They ask why no one simply used a mobile telephone. Adults smile and explain that such things did not exist in ordinary homes. The children find this fact more unbelievable than the storm. You enter a house where a brass fireplace tool stands beside the hearth. Its handle is worn smooth. The owner keeps it because his father used it throughout the storm, tending the fire while neighbours slept across the floor. The tool is not valuable in money. It is valuable in touch. When held, it connects one hand to another across time. In another family, a recipe becomes part of the memory. The stew prepared during the storm was made from potatoes, canned tomatoes, onions, and whatever else remained in the cupboard. No exact recipe survives. Each attempt to recreate it tastes different. Still, the family prepares it on certain winter nights. They call it Snowstorm stew. The name matters more than accuracy. Across the city, stories attach themselves to places. A hotel lobby becomes the place where two strangers met and later married. A church basement becomes the place where a lost child was reunited with his father. A bakery becomes the place where bread was given away until the shelves were empty. A narrow apartment becomes the place where 12 people slept without complaint, although this last detail is almost certainly generous. The physical traces fade. Snow melts, damaged plaster is repaired, broken branches are removed. Automobiles return to the streets, smoke stains are scrubbed from walls, but memory keeps the city covered in white long after the pavement is visible again. You feel how disaster can become part of identity. New Yorkers speak of endurance with pride. The storm joins older stories of fiends. Blackouts, strikes, heat, cold, and crowded streets. Each event adds another layer to the belief that the city may bend, complain some, argue, and improvise. But it does not easily surrender. That belief contains truth and exaggeration. Cities survive because people do. People survive because others notice when they're missing, cold, hungry, stranded, or afraid. The grandeur lies not in the buildings alone, but in the small decisions made inside them. Open the door, share the soup, carry the coal, keep the fire alive. You stand near a window as evening settles over a calmer street. Traffic moves again, shop lights glow, footsteps return to the pavement. Inside, the fireplace burns for comfort rather than survival. Its flame is smaller now, but the sight carries a deeper meaning. Every ember recalls a city gathered into warm rooms while snow erased the world outside. Every spark recalls a hand passing wood toward the grate. Every quiet crack recalls the night when warmth became shared memory. The last mound of snow beside this avenue begins to collapse under a mild afternoon sun. You hear water running beneath the crust, hidden at first, then visible as thin streams searching for the nearest drain. The city slowly reveals itself. Curbs reappear, steps emerge, automobile roofs shed heavy layers that slide onto the pavement with soft, sudden thumps. The white seance gives way to ordinary noise. Engines start, delivery carts rattle, shop doors open and close, shoes strike wet sidewalks. The sound is almost startling after so many hours of muffled streets. You walk beneath dripping awnings while workers clear the remaining piles from entrances. Dirty snow rests along the gutters, marked by soot, sand, and thousands of footsteps. The storm no longer looks pure or mysterious. It has become heavy work waiting to be removed. Inside homes, chairs return to their usual places. Blankets are folded. Mattresses are carried from warm rooms back into bedrooms. Cups are washed and placed in cupboards. Borrowed coats are returned to their owners. Wet newspapers are gathered from floors and thrown away. The crowded rooms become spacious again. Some people welcome the restored order. Others find the quiet strangely empty. Records confirm that city recovery from a major winter storm continues long after snow stops falling. Streets must be cleared, damaged wires repaired, public transportation restored, supplies delivered, and buildings inspected. The visible storm ends first, the practical storm lingers in schedules, bills, repairs, and exhausted bodies. You enter a parlour where only one log remains beside the hearth. The family no longer needs it for survival. The radiator is warm, electricity is steady, food has arrived from the grocery. Still, yet the log is placed riffly on the grate. A match touches the kindling. A modest flame rises. This fire is not urgent. It is a farewell. The room fills with a softer warmth than anyone remembers from the hardest hours. There is no counting of fuel now, no anxious glance toward the window, no need to calculate whether an ember can last until morning. The fire is allowed to burn simply because it is beautiful. A curious footnote from many family traditions is the habit of saving one partly burned piece of wood from an important fire. Some people believed that using it to start another hearth carried good fortune from one gathering into the next. Whether anyone in this room believes such a thing hardly matters. The blackened fragment feels worth keeping. You hold it carefully with the iron tongs. Its surface is light, brittle, and grey. It once helped warm a crowded room. Now it becomes a small object of remembrance. Outside, children walk through the shrinking drifts and discover lost possessions. A red mitten appears near a fence. A wooden sled emerges from a bank. A newspaper lies pressed flat beneath clear ice. Its old forecast still visible through the frozen surface. The city seems to be returning items it borrowed during the storm. At the railway terminal, departure boards show fuller schedules. Passengers still face delays, but movement has regained its confidence. Porters carry luggage. conductors call destinations, coffee stands serve long lines of travellers. A woman boards a train after spending several nights with strangers. She carries a paper bag containing sandwiches prepared by her hosts. At the doorway she turns and waves. The people on the platform wave back. No promise is made that they will meet again. The kindness remains complete without one. Scholars continue to dispute how long the social effects of shared disasters endure. Some studies suggest that cooperation fades when ordinary life returns. Other accounts describe friendships, marriages, neighbourhood groups, and family customs born during emergencies. Human connection rarely follows a simple rule. Some bonds last a lifetime, some last only long enough to carry a stranger through one dangerous night. You move through a street where a repaired traffic signal changes from red to green. Automobiles roll forward. A driver sounds the horn when the vehicle ahead hesitates. Normal impatience has returned with impressive speed. The city is recovering. At a bakery, fresh loaves fill the window. At a pharmacy, medicine deliveries are unpacked. At a school, custodians clear the steps while teachers prepare classrooms. Children will return carrying stories that compete in size and drama. One child will claim a drift reached the second floor. Another will insist that a fire engine sailed through the snow like a ship. Their teacher may correct the details. The wonder will survive the correction. You pass a hospital where staff members finally leave at the end of extended shifts. They step into daylight with tired faces and small bags beneath their arms. Some are met by relatives. Others walk toward trains or waiting automobiles. A nurse pauses at the entrance and looks back through the glass doors. Then she pulls her coat tighter and goes home. At the firehouse, equipment is cleaned and inspected. Hoses are dried, tools return to their racks, soot is washed from coats, the men speak quietly over hot coffee. The alarm bell remains silent for a time. Silence in a firehouse is never guaranteed, so they accept it gratefully. The remaining snow grows smaller each day. Sunlight reaches patches of pavement. Water runs beneath bridges. Roofs lighten. The city loses its temporary white shape and returns to brick and stone, steel, perfume, glass, and smoke. Yet something gentle remains within the rooms where people gathered. You sense it when a neighbour pauses to ask whether someone needs help. You hear it when a grocer tells a customer that payment can wait. You see it when firewood is stacked more carefully beside a hearth, not from fear, but from respect. The storm has ended without truly vanishing. It survives as caution, gratitude, grief, and story. Now the final fuss settles lower. Flames fold inward around the darkening log, red light moves across the bricks. The room becomes quiet enough to hear the faint ticking of a clock and the gentle sigh of air passing through the chimney. You sit near the hearth and allow your breathing to slow. The snow beyond the window is no longer falling. The streets are open. The doors are secure. The city rests beneath a clear night sky. As the final embers soften, you can leave this winter evening with the knowledge that warmth was never held by fire alone. It lived in every open doorway, every shared meal, every careful hand, and every voice that offered comfort when the cold pressed close. Let the last orange glow fade gently now. Let the crowded rooms grow peaceful. Let the distant city sounds become quiet and still. As you rest, share in the comments which moment stayed with you most. Perhaps it was the glowing hearth, the hospital corridor, the buried avenue, or the stranger welcome through an open door. Your thoughts help keep these human stories alive. When you are ready for another journey, choose the next video on the channel and allow another night from history to carry you softly towards sleep. For now, release the storm. The wind has passed. The fire is warm. Your eyes may close. May your home remain peaceful. Your loved ones remain safe and your night become calm. Blessings to you and your family.